Welcome to another VeVe Digital Collectibles comic breakdown, and this one's a big one because it's a first ever historic release, our very first physical and digital comic release on VeVe. And here to talk to me about it is the maker and creator of this comic himself, Vincent. Vincent, thank you so much for taking the time to come talk with us. I'm excited about this comic. I'm excited to talk about it with you. But first, please introduce yourself to our collectors and tell them a little bit about how your lifelong addiction to comics has led to a very healthy The Addiction #1.
Hi, my name is Vincent Zurzolo. I am the president of Metropolis Comics, the world's largest dealership for vintage comic books, as well as ComicConnect.com, the premier online auction site for vintage comic books and collectibles. I have loved comic books since I was a little boy, since before I could even read. I remember looking at the pictures and just being in amazement at how incredible they were. I loved characters like Spider-Man and Deathlock and the Fantastic Four and the Avengers, Superman, Batman, Wonder Woman. I was amazed by all of them, and it turned into a lifelong passion for me that I turned into a successful business. And I have always had a childhood dream. When I was with my friends, we would sit, we'd fold paper together and make our own comic books. And now I have the chance to make my very own for real. And that is what we're doing. The Addiction is coming to you live and digitally and in print, and it's going to be amazing.
Thank you so much for that introduction, Vincent. And before we dive into the comic and the art and the character and the story behind it, I'm curious about how you heard about VeVe.
I love the VeVe community. I'll tell you my first experience learning about VeVe. I was at a Gary Vaynerchuk convention in Minneapolis, VCon, and a potential client, walked up to our booth. We were there promoting our businesses and showing off the comic books that we had for sale. And the client walked up and pointed to a Daredevil Comics #1 and said, "I own that book." I said, "Oh, that's really cool. Great. You're a comic collector. You know, we've been meeting a lot of people who are into digital collectibles, but not many, comic book collectors." And he said, "Yeah, let me show it to you." And he pulled out his phone and opened up the VeVe app and showed me the book. And he said, "Yeah, I own it right here." And I was like, wow, that's absolutely fascinating. A couple months later, I was at another convention, and another client came up to the booth telling me how he collects the comic books digitally and that he wanted to start collecting them in print. And I just thought this was absolutely fantastic and amazing because I see it as an opportunity to reach so many more people. And the more I learned about VeVe and the philosophy and the community that they've developed over time, the more I realized that this was just the right place for us. We want to make the world of the addiction as accessible as humanly possible. And that's why we felt VeVe was the perfect partner.
You know, it's really exciting to hear you talk about digital collectibles like that. And I think there's a misconception from a lot of physical collectors that, no one's going to accept the digital space. But it's interesting because the more people that I talk to that collect massive amounts of things, the more digital collecting makes sense to them, because kind of like my backdrop here, and I'm just a small-time collector, there's only so much space.
Corey, I couldn't agree with you more. I think there are so many things about digital collectibles that make them incredibly appealing to people. Now, you have to understand, I come from the background where I am really a print comic book collector. I collect comic books from the Golden Age, the Silver Age, the Bronze Age, the Copper Age, all the way up to modern times. I have an inventory of over 150,000 books, and it takes up a lot of space. I also have my own personal collection, which takes up a lot of space. Now, the thing I love about digital is you have it on your phone or you have it in your smart wallet, and it's such a cool way to collect because at any moment you have access to it. You can read it, you can look at it, you can share it with friends. And I think that this concept generationally will continue to increase because I think new types of new mediums take time for people to get used to. And I think that the longer this is around, the more and more people will be drawn to it.
All right, so we've made it through the introductions and sort of the origin story of how you came to VeVe. Let's talk about this comic. I know you've probably been practicing an elevator pitch for New York Comic Con as people come to your booth to check out the comic. Can you give it to us? What is your elevator pitch for The Addiction?
Corey, I'm so happy you asked me for the elevator pitch because it's something I've been working on for quite some time, so here goes. The Addiction at its core is about second chances. Doctor Niki Tino has dedicated her life to fighting drug addiction. She's gotten so good at it that the local drug cartels have taken notice and they want to make an example out of her. They want to make her look like she's a drug addict. They kidnap her and they shoot her up with a cocktail of drugs. And Niki goes through what a lifelong junkie would go through in one night. Eventually, the drugs kill her. But after the chemicals mix with her blood, they bring her back to life. Now she's got a second chance and an uncanny ability. From her slightest touch, she can inject any type of drug into a person's body. And thus begins the adventures of the addiction.
I love it. And we're going to include chapters on the bottom of this video so people can jump around to find what they want if they don't want to listen to the larger sections. But I want to know the larger sections. So what is the heart and soul and the purpose of this story? You gave us the elevator pitch. Can you dive a little bit deeper into what is the addiction? What's the soul of this story?
You know, Corey, it's a great question. What is the story we're trying to tell? And, you know, I'm sure if you asked David, he would have a very different answer, or maybe some things that would overlap. But for me, this is, there's so many things that are intertwined in the addiction. Obviously, there's the underlying theme of addiction. We're all addicted to something. What's your addiction? We're all addicted to something. And so you have to think about that. In our comic book, you're going to see many different themes. Obviously, drugs play a part in this, but love, food, and those are just a couple of examples. There are so many others. And the reader's going to have to kind of like look into it. For us, the story of the addiction is to try to make a realistic look at a superhero, so to speak. So in my mind, no superhero in the real world would ever wear a costume because that's basically painting a bullseye on your chest. Niki doesn't wear a costume. She dresses fashionably, but when she uses her powers, the touch, her skin turns a chalky white and her eyes turn black. So that's her costume per se. So now we have this comic book and we want to make it kind of realistic in a superhero world, in a fantastic world. And we have Niki with her powers, and realizing that she was such a workaholic when she was a doctor, and now she has a whole new way she can fight the drug war. She realizes the second chance she has at life, she was dead, the second chance, she wants to do things a little differently. She had never had time for romance. Now she has a boyfriend, Enzo. And Enzo is a fantastic character. He is a barista, but also aspiring at so many different things. We wanted to make it kind of like a very fun juxtaposition of characters and play with typical archetypes from comic book themes, but turn them on their heads. So in our comic book, Niki is really like Superman and Enzo is Lois Lane. And that's not an easy thing for a true blue New Yorker to deal with, especially not one like Enzo.
I really appreciate that deeper insight, Vincent. In New York, that's a major part of your story. It's a major backdrop for your story. And you've tied New York into your story in a way that I don't think anyone else ever has. Can you give us a little bit more about that?
I'm a Marvel guy, and Marvel comic books took place in New York for the most part. And so I wanted our world to be in the real world. And so it's New York City. And New York City is another character in this comic book. One of the things we've also tried to incorporate in this is food, our love of food. Dave and I both really love food. And this will be the first time a comic book has ever been launched in conjunction with the promotion, co-branding, and product placement with a fantastic restaurant in New York City, pizzeria, my favorite pizzeria in New York, Grimaldi's at the Limelight, which is an old church on 20th Street and 6th Avenue that's been converted over time. It was a nightclub, and now it's shopping and this amazing pizzeria. If you go into the Grimaldi's at the Limelight or in their Douglaston location, you can order the Addiction Special. And if you do, you'll get a QR code which will allow you to read a few of the pages from the Addiction and then either buy it digitally through VeVe or in print from us. So that's really exciting and really cool and fun. So it's part of the story we're trying to tell. Our love of food, our love of comic books, our love of New York City.
All right, Vincent, this is the part of the video where I would go through each and every cover, but instead I'd love for you just to talk to us generally about the artistic direction with all these beautiful variants. And while that's happening, I'm going to throw each of the digital versions up on the screen with the edition numbers.
Corey, I am so proud of the team that we've built. David and I, first of all, I'm so happy to have David on board. His experience in comic books and his writing style has been just incredible. Together, I think we've really been able to fashion something very special. But going from there, we had to build out the team. And it took us a long time to find the right artist for the interior of the Addiction. And I am so happy that we've been able to work with Eisner nominated Claudia Balboni. Claudia is from Rome, Italy. She lives in Rome, Italy, and she is fantastic. She's been working in the comic book world for quite some time. She's done Fair Lady for Image. She worked on Star Trek for IDW, and a whole host of other titles. What I love about Claudia's artwork is while it's steeped in traditional European styling for comic book art, she also has been able to combine that with manga and anime. And I think it makes this incredible blend of East meets West in comic book art. And her storytelling is fantastic because comic book art is not just about being able to draw, it's being able to tell a story through sequential art. That is incredibly important to note. Our colorist, Brad Simpson. Now, Brad Simpson is a veteran of the coloring of comic book world, and he has been a pleasure. Consummate professional, takes a lot of our notes to heart and really blends them with his knowledge of color palettes and his color theory to really bring out the best and create moods and tension and develop a scene in a way. It's almost like it really is another part of the storytelling. Last but not least for the interiors, Dave Sharpe, another veteran of the comic book world. He's our letterer. I have never been like the type of person who followed like different letterers, but watching Dave work and seeing how he developed a lettering style for our comic book has been really incredible. When he does it, you see that a whole page takes on a new life simply by the change of a font or the styling of a font. One of my oldest friends in the comic art world is David Mack. David Mack, and many of you may know him, he created the character Echo from the Daredevil series, who also appeared in the Hawkeye Disney Plus series, which I thought was a really great character. I really love that character. And he also created one of my favorite comic books of all time, Kabuki, which if you haven't read, you really should read. It's amazing. David has won countless number of awards, and he actually drew the cover, painted the cover that's right behind me. And when you see one of his covers, you start noticing his covers everywhere. He's been around for quite some time and has an incredible style and technique that is uniquely David Mack. Next on board, we have a fantastic rising star in the comic book world as one of our cover artists, Adres Labrada. He's out of Miami, and he is absolutely fantastic. I got to meet him at a Miami Con where he brought over a comic book that he'd been working on, and I looked at it and said, boy, that character looks a little bit like our character. And so it was almost like immediate. We just had this great rapport, and we started working together. And I really believe this guy is going to be one of the biggest names in comic books. He's doing covers for all 3 issues. And when you see the VeVe red and the VeVe blue cover, you're going to know how special this guy is. They're just dynamite covers. We have one of the most popular cover artists in the world. He is very well known for his digital art. His name is Stanley Lau, but you probably know him better as Artgerm. So that's going to be one of our variant covers as well for issue number 1. He has been just such a pleasure. I met him at the Lake Como Art Con in Lake Como, Italy. Another artist who was our original artist and when we first started working on the diction is Eisner award-winning Alitha Martinez. And Alitha and I have known each other for quite some time. And she is so talented and so easy to work with and just such a pleasure. And I consider I consider everybody here a friend, but Alitha and I go back a ways. And it's just really nice to see how successful she's become in the comic book world. And her cover is near and dear to my heart. And that's that one right there. And I just absolutely adore it. And I can't wait for you to see this. It's going to be incredible.
All right, Vincent, we're reaching the end of this. We've talked about the physical comics. We've talked about the digital comics. We've talked about the story and the art. Would you like to share any last words for art collectors on VeVe?
My message to the VeVe community is this. I am so happy you guys love comic books and you love collecting digital comic books. I hope if you have the opportunity to read our comic book that you love it. I hope if you have the opportunity to come by New York Comic Con, come tell me all about your VeVe collection. I want to see it on your phone. And again, we'll be at booth 3537. Dave, you will be making pit stops over to our booth from time to time. And it would be great for you to get to meet him. He is just a fantastic guy. I love the community that he and his partner have built at VeVe. And I want you guys to have fun with this. Remember, people don't need comic books, they want comic books. And comic books are there to make you happy and make you think and entertain you and help you get an escape from the regular doldrums of ordinary life. They've been all those things for me, and they've also taught me lessons. They've created a great appreciation for me in art. For many of my customers, they've inspired them to their career paths. I've had police officers and firemen tell me that they wanted to be those professions because of superheroes. They knew they don't have superpowers, but if they could help people in some way, that would be a great thing. Doctors, lawyers, all these different people have come up to me and said how much comic books have inspired them. And again, if that can help shape somebody's life or help them find purpose, I think that's an amazing thing. And hopefully, maybe the addiction will have that same effect on one of you. And that would make me really happy. But for the most part, please enjoy this comic book, enjoy the experience, and keep reading comic books.
And with that, we have a wrap to a historic breakdown video, our very first physical and digital comic release. A massive thank you to Vincent and his entire team for helping facilitate this interview, and also for trusting us here at VeVe to get this story into the hands of as many readers as possible. Really hope that you're able to come visit us at New York Comic Con at both the Marvel VeVe booth or the Addiction booth. And until the next breakdown video, keep learning, sharing, and collecting what you love. This is Corey with VeVe, signing off.